Okay, at the end of today's presentation, you'll also get a copy of the recording and the presentation here, the slideshow. In that we'll have all of my contact information and my signature, so if you have any questions, any follow-up that you need, feel free to call or email me anytime. I am going to go through the slideshow presentation, which has a number of screenshots from the website in it. And after we complete the presentation, I will do a live demo to show you these features on the site. And then we will finish with a question and answer session. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those in the questions chat box on your page. And I will answer them at that time, or I'll hold off and answer them during the question and answer session. So today's focus is going to be how to use assessments on USA Test Prep to drive instruction and evaluate readiness. At this time of year, you have new students in your classrooms, so using USA Test Prep is a great way to go ahead and get an idea as to where these students are with the standards coming into your class. There are several different resources available on our website to do that with, but I'm going to be focusing on the basic benchmarks and the full test. So with your basic benchmark, this is where teachers will go into our benchmark tab, select basic mode versus custom mode, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, and use that basic benchmark as a pre-assessment. Full tests are completed from the student side. So the students can take a full test and then choose to report their score to the teacher. So which one should I use in the classroom? If you use the basic benchmark, what's nice about it is that every single student will be exposed to the same questions. So it'll assess them over all of the domains of your class and all of these different standards, and it'll be the same for every single student. So it'll give you a true picture of a data set that would be the same if we're looking at student A and student B. Student A answered question 1 correctly, student B did not. So you're going to get that item analysis to truly break down that assessment. The full test is a great option when you don't want to create a test, or if you just don't have time to create a basic benchmark. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to make a basic benchmark. But your students can go in and take full tests at any time, choose to report their score to you, and you can get an idea, like a progress report of how they're progressing through the content. So I'm going to show you first how to create a basic benchmark. All right, so this is a teacher homepage. On the home page, you have some different tabs down here at the bottom, and the third one is your benchmarks tab. So you'll click on the benchmarks tab, click on create new benchmark, and it'll take you to this screen where you'll put in some your basic settings. So you'll give it a name, and then you'll choose whether or not you'd like to share it. This is something that's unique on our site, where if you share a benchmark or share an assignment, share an assessment, it means that anyone else who teaches your content area, so this is for a 6th grade math test, any other teachers who have a 6th grade math class set up with USA Test Prep will get a copy of this assessment. So it's a great way to promote common assignments, common assessments, and collaboration within teams. And you can see our basic settings that can be adjusted. On the next screen, you'll get the option to create either a basic benchmark or a custom benchmark. I like using the basic benchmarks as a pre-assessment because it's going to be a test that the site creates for you. It's a summative test based on actual test percentages. We're going to get into that in a minute. The custom mode is going to be the mode that you use the most often, because this is where you can go in and hand select the standards you want to assess. You can hand select the question. So it gives you open range to our test bank to build formal and informal assessments. But for today, we're going to look at basic mode. When you get here to basic mode, you're going to have an option to set the length of the test you want to give. Our default length is small, and that just means there are 13 questions worth 13 points. I would recommend for the pre-assessment going to either the large or the full, just because that's going to get your students exposed to a lot more content. If you're concerned about a class period length, you can always have students save their progress and finish it the next day. So they can go in and save their work and finish it the next day in your class. And you'll notice here that it's telling you that basic mode will choose questions based on actual test percentages. So when we increase the size up to full, you'll see that this is now a 53 question test. So this is going to give me a clear picture as to where my students are with the standards coming in. When I click on that link for actual test percentages, it'll open up a link showing you the breakdown of your content area. So I'm building a sample Georgia 6th grade math test. So this is showing me the breakdown of how my students are going to be tested at the end of the year for 6th grade math. So this test that USA Test Prep is building for me is going to be 30% the number system, 12% ratios and proportional relationships, and so on. So it's going to give my students a test that will mirror the end of course standardized test. Once I've selected full test, 53 questions, I can just click on this continue and skip to preview, and this will take me straight to my preview screen. I can go in and add favorite questions, performance tasks, or free responses, but if I just want my students to get some multiple choice questions and on the content, I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the preview. Whenever you get here, there are a few things that you can do. One is I circled this arrow. You can change the order of the questions on the test. You also have the option to replace with a similar question. So if you see a question that you want to replace, you can use that option and it will populate 5 questions from within the same standard. All right. After we save the benchmark, you'll come to this screen and you'll see a few different things. One is the benchmark code. So if you are an administrator at your school and you want to build a school-wide benchmark that students are going to take for 6th grade math, you can give your teachers this code and your students will type that in to complete the test and the results will come straight to you. If you don't want the teachers to get those results. If you do want the teachers to get those results, you would just share it with them, and that way they could assign it to their students. So you can assign it. You can also print the benchmark codes, and that's just going to have this code here on it. I would recommend is having teachers write it on their boards if you choose to go that route. So now we're going to look at the results that you get from giving a benchmark. So I have assigned this 6th grade math benchmark to my students. They've taken it. So now we're going to look to see how we can use this data to drive instruction. So going back to the home page and clicking on the benchmarks tab, you'll see here is my beginning of the year pretest. And this results button is now blue, letting me know that I have student results ready. When I click here, I can see my test average for my class. If you have multiple classes that took the same test, you can sort to show other classes. You can also see here the scores by domain or view by element. So I can see that with my 5 domains for 6th grade math, how my students performed. So when I'm looking at this, and this could be just for my first period, so let's pretend I have a different class later. And they have different numbers here. When I'm looking at this, I can already start thinking to myself, okay, geometry is where they're struggling the most. So when I'm thinking of my pacing guide, I might think I might need to spend more time with geometry. I might need to spend more time with expressions and equations, whereas I might enrich some more with number system and statistics and probability. So you're able to use this to get an idea as to where your students are with the content already, where you might need to remediate, and where you might need to enrich. Also on this page, you'll see some different tabs, and this just shows you even more data that you get back from giving a benchmark, but we're going to focus on individual students. So whenever you assign individual students a benchmark, you will get this breakdown as well. So you can look to see the elapsed time that it took for them to take it, so please ignore my times because I just went in and chose answers for students. You can also see their score, and then you can click on view to get a really vivid and detailed picture of how they performed on the test. Your students can also go in and see this data, which is really nice. So let me show what that looks like. So I clicked on the student results. So we're going to look at Matt Ryan's pretest. You'll see that he made a 68 on the test. And you'll notice here, this is broken down by scores by domain. And you'll notice he has these 3 pink exclamation points next to these domains. Now, If we expanded this to view by element, it would break down every single standard that was on that test. This is great to use when you're working with individual students to show them, here's where you are with this standard, here's where I want you to be. But we're going to focus on this domain. So when you click on any of these pink exclamation points, it'll open up this little window for Matt that says, you scored less than 70% in this content area. Here are some suggested steps to improve your score. So this is built-in remediation on our site for every content area on a test, every domain, every standard, where a student scores less than 70%, it's going to give them the option to work on practice questions, review vocabulary, or watch videos to help them reinforce that standard. All right, so now we're going to move into, if I don't want to do a basic benchmark, students can take a full test. And I put here student view because we're going to be logged in as a student account to see this. So we're on a student's page right now. So we're on Matt Ryan's page. And so let's say I'm now his ELA teacher. So I've told him, all right, kids, go ahead and log into USA Test Prep. When you're logged on your home page, select 6th grade, select ELA. When this test landing page populates, you'll tell them to click on this orange Take a Test icon. When they click here, they'll choose, just like we did with basic benchmarks, small, medium, large, or full. And so if you want to take a full test, you'll click full. Medium would be half of that. So for this one, we chose a full test. So this is a full test over all of the domains and elements within 6th grade ELA, question count of 50, so it's a 50 question test. You'll notice here, that it has teacher. So this is where he would choose my name and then my class period. And that way his score will come to me. All right, so this is after he's taken the test, so he made a 70% here. And you'll see that he has these pink exclamation points for these different content areas to let him know that he needs to remediate there. Now, the difference between full test and basic benchmark, like I said, is you will only be able to see this for every individual student. You're not going to be able to get a class picture because they all took different tests. Their tests were built on the same domains and the same breakdown, but the questions are different because they're going to randomly populate for every student. Okay? So now we're going to go back into the teacher account and view the student results. So remember, this is to look at the full test. So back on the teacher homepage, this is the class that Matt is in for me. When I click on this orange class results icon, come on, my mouse is going crazy, I'm sorry. All right, you'll click on this class results icon and it'll populate all of the class results that my students have submitted. And you'll see here, Matt Ryan, 70% for this grade 6 ELA test. So then I can click on view and it'll bring me back to that test results page. But I'll have to do this for every individual student because every test was randomly populated for them. You can also look at the class progress report for each of your classes, and I'm going to show you where this icon is. This is a great tool to use to see how your students as a class are progressing through each standard. It's a great way to assess student readiness as a whole. So when you look at this upcoming domain and you look at upcoming lessons, you can get an idea as to who you might need to pull for small groups for remedial attention. You can also look at who might be students ready for enrichment or to be student peers, different things like that. So you can filter your results to pull up certain dates or to pull different data. So the way that you do this is you'll click on this progress report icon. So it's your third icon next to your class. When you click here, you'll choose your content area. So we're going to look at 6th grade math. So when we look here, you'll see that right now my students are answering 53% of the questions correctly in this domain. Now, at the beginning of the year, after you've had a class of 25 to 30 students take these tests, you're going to have a lot more numbers than what I have. So it's going to give you an even a clearer picture. So as your students get more and more exposure on the website to different questions, you'll see these numbers rise up into the hundreds and thousands, depending on what time of year it is. I do want to show you that you have this gear icon, and that's where you would go in and pull where you want, or decide where you want the data to pull from. So you can look at August, and then you can then pull up September's data and look to see how your students are doing. You can also decide which resources you want the data to pull from. But this is showing you your class information. You can also click on student.rank to get a student breakdown, but class is going to show you where they are as a class. Student.rank is nice to use when you're wanting to make groups, and you can see who you might want to group together if you want to do mixed groups or same level groups. Okay, so now we're going to do the demo followed by the question and answer session. So remember, guys, if you have any questions as I'm going through this, feel free to type them in the questions box and I will address them after the demo. So let's go ahead and pull up my USA Test Prep screen. All right, so this is my sample USA Test Prep account. So the first thing we're going to do is build a basic benchmark. So I'm going to click on my benchmarks tab, create new benchmark, and I'm going to call this Science Pre-Assessment 2017. All right, I can choose to share it with my colleagues, or I can just give it to my students. And then I'm going to choose my science class. Okay. When I get here, I have the option for basic or custom. Remember, custom, you are the creator. You can decide which questions you want to choose. But we're going to go with basic today for that pre-assessment. It's quick to make. All right, when we get here, the default is small. That means there's 13 questions worth 13 points, but I want my students to get some really good exposure to the content, to get that baseline data. So this is going to be a 50 question test worth 50 points. And when I click on this actual test percentages link, it'll show me what this test is going to look like. So I'll be able to see that breakdown of the domains of where these questions are going to pull from for my students. After I've done this, I can click on this continue and skip to preview just to go ahead and create the test. So it's going to create the test for me and load it. And so here is the test it has created. Remember that you can use these arrows to change the order of your questions if you'd like. You can also click on this replace with similar question to get 5 different choices from within the same standard if you'd rather use them. So if I choose option 3 here, it'll automatically replace it on my test. And now that I've created a test, I'm going to save it. So I've saved this benchmark. Here's my benchmark code, or I can go ahead and assign this to my students. If I'm not ready to assign it to my students, I can just go back to my home page. When I click on my benchmarks tab, there is my Science Pre-Assessment 2017. Once my students have started taking this assessment, my blue results button will come up letting me know that there are results for me to look at. So we're going to look at the results for math test number 1. So when I pull up these results, I will get that benchmark breakdown to see my test average for this one class. I can then see the domain breakdown, so I can see where my students are right now at the domain level, but I can also break it down by element. And guys, these might say different things for your states. You might have standard, you might have expectation, but you'll notice I can get a breakdown of every single element, how my students are performing. So I can go in here with my pacing guide and start looking at which areas I might need to spend more time with this year. So I can break it down by domain or element. When I scroll down here, remember I showed you the individual students. So I can look at each individual student's scores. So when I click on view, this will populate the student's results for me. So I can see this student needs a lot of remediation. Remember, this is beginning of the year pre-assessment. So it's just letting me know where this student is with the content right now. By clicking on these exclamation points, the student can click on these when they're logged in, and it will prompt them to work on practice questions, review vocab terms, and watch a video. So something that I did in my class a lot was I would pull up and look at these different student results. And I would look to see, like I would break it down, like number system might be the color red in my class, expressions and equations might be blue, but I would color code everything. And when I would pull up every student's scores, I would rank them like 1 to 5 with the color system. So for this student, expressions and equations, their number 1 area, so theirs would be blue. And then let's say that stats and probability is green. So I would rate them blue, green, yellow, orange, I don't know what color I said there, red. So that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But I would color code them because then when I would look at their sheets, when I would look in my conference notebook, I could see which students were blue for number 1. So then I might group those students together to work on something, because if their number 1 is blue, that's their strongest area. So I might put them together to work on an enrichment project. Whereas if blue is the last color for several of my students, that might be my small group that I pull and do some more intensive review. So you can think about grouping when you look at these domains to see which students can I start grouping together, which students can I use as peer tutors when I'm working on this domain. So there's lots of different things that you can do with this data. All right, so we're going to go back to the home page. Now we're going to log in as a student, and I'm going to show you where they can take the full test. So I'm just going to log in as one of my students. So this is a student home page. And remember, students can choose any of the content areas that they are in for you. So let's say that I have old guy for 6th grade ELA. So he can choose 6th grade ELA, go to the student test landing page, click on this take a test, choose full length if I tell them to, or large. If I tell them to choose large, they'll go in, choose my name and my class, and then that will load the test for them to complete. All right, so that's how students can go in and take the pre-assessment. And remember, this is nice because you don't have to make an assignment. The students can just do it. The only drawback is you're not going to get all that data like you will with giving a benchmark. Going back to my teacher account, I can then click on my progress reports button, choose my class, and then this populates that data for me. So I can look at how my students are progressing as a class. I can decide which dates I want to pull this data, which resources I want to use to pull the data, and then I can also look at a student.rank to see how my students are performing standard by standard. All right. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully you guys have some questions. If you need anything, feel free to type those in the questions box. If you do not have any questions, you are more than welcome to sign out. You will receive an email from me shortly with a link to the webinar, as well as a copy of the slideshow presentation, so you need to refer back to it. And it will also have all of my contact information in my signature. So if you have any questions, feel free to call or email me directly, and I'm happy to follow up with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you don't have any questions, feel free to sign out. If you have questions, I will be here for the next couple minutes to answer those for you. Okay, so I had the question, if you assign a class to take a full test at the same time, same length and same subject, you still don't get common results. So let me show you the difference between the two. So when you go to your home page and you click on assignments, click on new assignment, and we create it for this class. We can call it full test ELA pre-assessment. And we would choose test and then ELA full test. We can go and click continue. We'll go through our basic assignment settings and just save the assignment. So now I'm going to log in as those students to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to log in as Bilbo first, and I'll see my full test ELA pre-assessment. So when I begin this, his starts off with a passage about acupuncture, and then he has a give me liberty and give me death passage. So now I'm going to log in as a different student and see if it populates a different test, just to show you. So you'll see here, this student has a robots passage to start off, and then an excerpt from the value of community gardens. So the difference between the two is you will get a breakdown of the domain and standards that the students complete. However, they won't be on the same questions because the site randomly generates a different test for every student when you do a full test. When you do a basic benchmark, it generates a random test, but when you save it, it's only going to be those questions. So if you make a 53 question basic benchmark, question number 1 is going to be the same for all of your students. The breakdown for the full test is going to be the same as your basic. It's going to have those same domain percentages, but it's going to populate different questions. So that's why I generally recommend using the basic benchmark, just because you're giving the same test to every single student. Do I have any more questions? Oh, you are most welcome. If you need anything else, let me know.